Our home in the countryside. An old house is telling its stories. This is a translated version of our German film introducing the project Ein Haus erzählt, Geschichten. Translated for Mike and all the other members of our family in America, and also for people who knew Melvin Lee Forrester, and for anybody who might be interested in the old house in Schimmeldewog, Germany. What is special about this program? Rooms and various objects in the old house make history become alive by telling stories about the past. What kind of stories does the old house tell? Well, there are lots of subjects hidden in the old oak chest. You just have to lift the cover of the chest, pick something, and take it out. In 2033, the house will turn 250 years old, and I, the grandmother living in the house, would turn 80 then. I'm curious what will develop in those 12 years until that anniversary. What will develop around the program A House is Telling Stories. Schimmeldewog on a sunny late autumn day in 2020. And our house. The project starts with present time, with today. And it starts with the children, with these here, and also with my other grandkids. The project does not only want to catch the interest of people who normally have interest in the history of a region, in old traditions, and in the grown culture of the region. Our concept addresses to the younger generation also. Sure, children can also develop interest in the history of the house and in the life of people of past times. Here, let's have a look on the entrance and the windows of the old pub's guest room from outside. But now we go inside. There we meet the children of
Kirschen und Lindenfels. Und wir sehen aus wie früher bei der Wikingerzeit.
Maria maintains they are dressed like in the time of the Vikings. This remark is referring to a TV series about Gudrun, the Viking princess, who, together with her friends, is experiencing adventures in the nature of the wild north. We definitely live more in the wild southern area and live a few hundred years later, but Maria is drawing connections between her interests and her knowledge, and exactly that's how it should be done. Every visitor has to find his or her own way to get in touch with the house and with the objects of the past. And this is also true for children. The children, first of all, that means my grandkids. But others are meant also, and naturally grown-ups are invited to come as well. We leave the guest room of the pub now. And then we find our way to the attic. I remember the attic being a mysterious place in my childhood days. My younger sisters called it a frightening place, but I was magically attracted by it. All these rooms and doors. You could always go to one more room. and there were dark corners with interesting things, and you could always discover something new. The attic was a fascinating place. The film project started when the renovation works in the attic were about accomplished. In 2019-20, the attic first had to be emptied. The roof was getting an insulation, and then the southern part was made into a museum. The open space in the center was left rather unchanged. Here in this place, they used to pile up a little hill of wheat and rye for the bakery. When I was a kid, I went upstairs and used to let the corns trickle through my fingers. That's a very nice feeling. For our film about the hobgoblin, we were piling up straw on exactly the same place. Straw that the poor miller's daughter must spin to gold in the fairy tale. The oak chest she's sitting beside is dating back to the 18th century, and it's one of the very oldest things you can find in our house. Do you want to put your hands on the cover and close your eyes? Maybe you can feel a connection to these very long time past days the chest is dating from?
Yeah.
The kids do it. It feels like old tree, Maria
Es fühlt
says.
sich an wie alter Baum.
Das Holz ist
An wie altes Holz und als waren da früher Äpfel.
It feels like old wood and as if there were apples stored inside. Apples were cut, laid on these woven boards. They were dried in the oven and finally put in this chest. What's inside nowadays? The kids ask.
Was ist denn jetzt in der Kiste drin?
The kids were fascinated by the wooden chest with a metal fitting and very curious what could be hidden inside.
Vielleicht eine Zaubertruhe?
Is it a magical chest? Wolfie asks. This gave me the idea to fill the chest with new things every once in a while, things fitting to the subject we just are dealing with. In this case, there were objects inside connected with fairy tales. Little Mattis finds the wooden sword and big smile. Every visitor has to pick something he or she is attracted by, something that catches his or her interest. With Mattis it was the wooden sword. A grown-up possibly might have taken one of the old fairy tale books. Every visitor is bringing in his or her own personal background and connects it with the things laying in front of his or her eyes. Now we are curious what will become visible when the heavy cover of the chest will be opened next time, and what will catch the eyes of the one opening it. The old house can tell various stories, and it always tells stories people visiting are interested in. Themes you can develop interest for, you find enough. For example, the history of the house, dating back to 1783. The history of the building you can best trace back in the cellar. There still is the original wall and stone entrance of the old house from the 18th century. In the attic, the kids look at one of the oak beams of this old house and touch it. And they learn about the principles of these wooden constructions.
Darf ich mal probieren? Komm,
Closely connected to the history of the building is another theme the old house can tell stories about: family. Central for our family are Abraham Walter and his wife Margareta. He was the first professional baker and built a big baking oven and the guest room around the old house of his father. That's how our house got its present appearance. Abraham, that's the old man on the picture. He's the oldest one of our ancestors we have a picture of. All older ones we don't have pictures, just know their names. During Corona time, I made this family tree. You kids are on it too. Your names are written up there where Lotta shows her name. In this top line are the kids' names, and in the very bottom down there's Abraham's grandfather Johannes Walter, who built the house that the oak beam is part of. And between, many, many names. Many people. There are many stories about these people. Funny stories and sad stories, or even stories that are both funny and sad at the same time. These stories are like pieces of a puzzle. Put together, they form a picture of the time these people were living in. Old toys can tell a lot about former generations and their life too. This doll kitchen of my mother, Grandma Elisabeth, tells stories about a little girl living in the time of World War II in the city of Freiburg in the southern part of Germany. Dolly bed warmer and Dolly kettle just look like the big originals, don't they? And playing with it, the little girls were learning to be a housewife and a mama. Toys often were made out of wood. Here in the rather poor valleys of the countryside, there was enough wood available. Out of that, they developed a possibility for bettering up their income. These wooden horses were typical for our area. They were packed in such baskets and carried all the way to the city on foot for selling. Little boys were so happy when they found such a horse under the Christmas tree. Toys tell stories also about economical conditions in the poor country in former times. Things in the house mostly tell stories in small scale. They talk about the family, the village, the region. But behind that you often find information about the big world history.
Oh, the wind is blowing, through the graves the wind is blowing.
World War I and II have left their traces in the house too. Things connected with this subject can be found in a little office room in the cellar. Looking at persons and their lives, you can see a picture of history, just for a moment. Just for a moment. Then it's quickly fading away. What is left are things that seem to tell their stories. Clothes, costumes and headgear and accessoires are also some of the objects telling stories. Theater costumes and historical clothing are sorted and organized in the attic. Would you believe that the clothes Abraham and his wife are wearing on the picture of 1900 still were here in the house? Yes, we found these original clothing, all kept through centuries in chests and cabinets. Nightgowns and the most funny underwear from a time span of 150 years. Headdresses like bonnets from baby age until deathbed and coffin. Now it's getting a little crazy. A horror cabinet in the attic. There's a collection of handmade fantastic animals that shows some of the psychiatric tendencies of some of the people living in the house. All the animals are homemade. After this crazy theme, we again come into the fields of seriosity and tradition. Spinning wheel and other instruments connected with processing of wool and flax, basket weaving, linen making are collected here in the little side room under the roof. All these things tell you about people's everyday life in former times. But sometimes things stay dumb and silent and don't want to tell their secrets. We absolutely don't have the slightest idea what this thing is or what it once was good for. On the other hand, my grandson Wolfie surprised me exactly knowing what the flax-breaking instrument was used for and how.
Da legt man Flachs rein und macht wieder zu. Dann schubst man es ein bisschen weiter, macht wieder zu, macht es wieder ein bisschen weiter, wieder zu.
He learned that in a film about a stork who made linen pants for his friend the mole. In this children's film, it obviously was demonstrated which steps are needed until you can make linen out of flax. It's the experience of touching, doing something yourself that's important here. It's always nice when you get the chance to not only look at something but touch it, do something with it. Wolfie tries out the flax breaking device. Well, it's not really flax breaking. He uses the stems of a bundle of dried flowers we found in the garden. It can also be interesting to experience the atmosphere of the house by just watching. Here Jonathan with the cavalry saber of his grandpa Melvin in a scene of our film The Hobgoblin, and the miller and the young king, also a scene of our Hobgoblin film. We also plan on action days. Here are only 3 examples picked out of many possibilities. First, an action day around the 100-year bakery from 1865 to 1965. Second, when Corona restrictions fall, evenings sitting together singing and drinking and storytelling in the old pub. Third, a day of the open door in our old grocery store. Oh, that's a rhyme in English. Not the same in German. A day of the open door in our old grocery store. It's my observation with visitors, children, but also grown-ups. You don't have to do a lot. The scenery, the various things here develop kind of a narrative power just by itself, bringing up memories, provoking thoughts and ideas. Therefore, it stays open what will develop during the coming years. In the old oak chest, there is so much more material for stories, activities, films. It's just waiting to get discovered. Maybe one time we'll have a day when visitors are invited to walk around in the whole house, from one room to another. But these rooms won't be presented like you see it here. All these locations should become alive. In every room, the visitors would then meet somebody. Somebody dressed in clothes of the time. Maybe the visitor would be told something about the room's history, or would get invited to simply sit down and listen to Aunt Bärbel reading stories to the kids. A living museum, that's the concept. A living museum, that's the words of my husband, Melvin Forrester. Melvin Forrester. The Irish or Scottish American from California who spent the last 20 years of his life here. Already being sick, he once opened the door of this room saying, "This I didn't get done. It's left for the kids, but it's a lot that got accomplished." Well, Melvin, it's not possible to ever get done with renovating such a place. In our living museum, everything is just a snapshot, a momentary picture picked out of the flowing stream of life. There are so many stories around this house. My parents, aunts, grandparents told them to me. And now I sit here and tell you, the kids. One day, might be pretty soon, I'm not here anymore. And maybe when Maria and Matilda will be mamas and Wolfie a papa, or even an old grandpa, maybe then they will tell stories to their children. That's the flowing stream of life.